Welcome to Adoption and Beyond. I'm Stephanie, and today I'm excited to be sitting down with Linda Sexton, author of the award-winning book, The Branches We Cherish, an open adoption memoir. I have such a hard time with that word, memoir. I want to start by being really honest with you. I'm embarrassed to say that I came to the adoption work over 30 years ago believing that open adoption was a terrible idea. And I thought it would confuse children, create impossible complications for adopting families, and frankly, the birth parents didn't deserve to know how their kiddos were doing. Fast forward 3 decades, I now believe open adoption is one of the most important things we can offer children, adopting families, and birth families. It's truly the best thing for all, in my opinion, or at least the spirit of openness in adoption is. So, what changed my mind? Experience. Watching families thrive, seeing adoptees grow up with their questions answered and their identities intact. And honestly, learning from experts like Linda, who've lived it and are willing to share the real, unfiltered truth about what open adoption looks like over time. I recently listened to Linda's book on Audible, and I have to tell you, this is the book that I wish existed 30 years ago. Linda is an adoptive mom twice over, an open adoption speaker, and someone who made the same journey many of you are on right now. From fear and uncertainty about birth family connections to embracing those relationships as essential for her children's well-being. She will share her transformation, some hard-won lessons about birth fathers, sibling connections, and the mindset shifts that changed everything for her family. Whether you're new to open adoptions already, committed and wondering how to do it well, this conversation is for you. Linda, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm really excited to be here.
Great. So I am going to dive into my first question, and this is titled Linda's Transformational Journey. Linda, let's go back to the beginning of your adoption journey. You mentioned having all of these fears about open adoption, the confusion, the awkwardness, whether the birth mom might want her child back. Can you paint a picture for us of where you were emotionally when you first started, and then walk us through how that perspective transformed over time?
Yes, Stephanie, I'm really happy to do that. And when I think back to where I was, and it was more than 3 decades ago where we started, at that time, adoptions were almost all closed, secretive, and in fact, the adoptive parents and the birth parents did not know each other. And hence, of course, the adopted child didn't know very much about their biological family. So that's where we were. And frankly, that's what I expected my adoption would be.
Mhm.
David, my husband, and I learned that probably open adoption, which was just beginning at that time, may be the best route for us to go. So when we heard about this, there weren't many agencies doing it, but we embraced it. We thought this makes a lot of sense because if you think about how can an expecting mom make an adoption plan and then not really know about her child. How's her child doing? So we thought this makes a lot of sense. And in fact, we thought at that time that you would do it primarily for the benefit of the birth mother. So
Mhm.
that's where our head was at. Now, although we embraced it, we did have a lot of doubts and fears, and nobody could answer our questions. And when we shared with our friends and family what we wanted to do, while they
Mhm.
were very supportive of our adoption plan, the
Right.
idea of open adoption, they were like, "What are you thinking?" And so our own doubts were amplified by our friends and family's doubts. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, onward we went. And our perspective changed so much over time, but I'd like to give you a couple of examples. So, for our first adoption, the birth mom, her name is Jenna, and Jenna had told us we had met her and matched with her prior to her giving birth to Finley, who's our
Mhm.
oldest.
Mhm.
And Jenna told us, I do want to stay in touch, but only through cards and pictures. And in
Mhm.
fact, Jenna was very specific. I want pictures twice a year, birthday and Christmas, and that's it. And I remember thinking, well, maybe that's okay as long as we stay in touch.
Yeah.
Well, 1 month after we brought Finley home from the hospital, Jenna
Mhm.
called and she said, I want to see you and I want to see the baby. And I
Mhm.
remember, the fear. It was like,
Yeah.
what is going to happen? Is Jenna
Right.
going to want the baby back?
Yeah.
And David and I put Finley in the car. We went to meet Jenna and her mom at a restaurant. And
Mhm.
we walked in, and Jenna's mom took the baby in her arms and handed her to Jenna. And I just remember my heart was racing. And, all of a sudden the baby started fussing, and Jenna handed the baby back to me. And we
Mhm.
sat down and had a conversation. And I was thinking, okay, what comes next? What is
Right.
Jenna really going to ask for?
Yeah.
But the most amazing thing happened at the restaurant that day. Jenna's mother pulled out Jenna's baby blanket. And
Mhm.
when Jenna was born, her mom embroidered her name and birth date on that baby blanket. And what she did was she embroidered Finley's name and birth
Mhm.
date right under Jenna's. And
Mhm.
she handed it to me.
Uh-huh.
And she said, I want you to have this. And
Oh.
I want Finley to have this. I mean, I
Mhm.
get emotional even thinking about that
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. That's so amazing.
But that day was an affirmation
Mhm.
that they wanted us to be parents. So that was the beginning of my transformation journey about being so afraid of what it would mean to have a birth mom in the picture.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I hear that often where it just feels like sometimes the parents really enjoy the confirmation that this they want me to be the parent, I am the parent, and they feel like that just really gives them the validity that they didn't know they needed to know to
Yes,
say,
exactly.
yeah,
I didn't
mhm,
know I needed it that time. And then
yeah,
I think about when Belle, our second, and by the way, also known as Sophie, Belle's
okay,
name is Sophie in the book, but
uh-huh,
When Belle was about 6 or 7, her birth father, Ricky, was visiting us, and
mhm,
we were having a nice visit. And Belle very innocently went up to Ricky and asked him for permission to do something. I can't even remember what it was.
uh-huh,
And Ricky just instinctively looked at her and said, well, you better ask your parents about that. And it was very natural. I mean, there was no
mhm,
confusion on
mhm,
anyone's part. But
yeah,
when I look back at that moment, again, that was affirmation. Ricky
mhm,
wanted us to be the parent. He
right,
wasn't visiting Belle so that he could be a parent.
right,
And of
right,
course, we all know that open adoption is not co-parenting, but it's
mhm,
natural to be really concerned about,
mhm,
are the birth parents going to get in the way of parenting?
yes,
And we
yes,
never had that issue.
that's great. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the second question, the mindset that changed everything. You said the birth father's family and what are the birth families are your family. And that once you have that mindset, decision became much easier. That's pretty radical shift from how many adoptive parents think. Can you unpack that, what that really means, and provide an example of how that mindset changed how you approached your family relationships?
Yes, yes, Stephanie. I was thinking about this, and that mindset that birth families are your family is so important. And once you get there, things become so much easier. But
Mm,
for me, it was actually gradual. So I remember I did have a first aha moment about that. And that's actually when Jenna, Finley's birth mom, got married.
mm,
And Finley was 4 years old when Jenna got married. And Jenna called us and said, hey, can Finley be in my wedding?
mhm,
David and I had to really think about that. Does this make
mm,
sense? Is it going to be good for Jenna? Is it going to be good for us and for our family?
right.
But we came to the conclusion that yes, let's do that. At the very least, this is what I was thinking. I'll get some good pictures because I don't know how long Jen is going to be in the picture, right?
Right,
And,
right.
every opportunity I had to take pictures was like precious.
Hmm, hmm.
So we were at the wedding. And Finley was in the wedding party, and they had the entire wedding party standing up at the altar on the riser during the ceremony. And
Hmm.
David and I sat kind of close to the front, and I made eye contact with Finley. And I could see that Finley was scared because you
Oh,
know how the little lips quiver and, the
yeah.
face. And we made eye contact, and all of a sudden, Finley looked at me, jumped down off of the riser. Now, this is in the middle of the wedding ceremony, by the way, and boom, 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 ran to the
Hmm.
pews and came into my lap and jumped right on my lap.
Oh.
And that was an aha moment for me. It was like, of course, Linda, you are Finley's mother.
Hmm, hmm,
And there is room for you and Jenna in Finley's life.
hmm.
And I knew that at the time. So that was the beginning of my thinking, wait a minute, Jenna is my family. But I didn't get there immediately. In fact, we had moved. We moved about a year later, got transferred out of town, out of state.
Hmm.
And I remember telling my family, I was very excited about it. I told my sisters and all my friends, and I hesitated to tell Jenna. Jenna was one of the last people I told.
Hmm.
And Jenna called me out on that.
Yeah.
She absolutely did. She said, "You you did not treat me like family." And I
Mm.
thought, "Oh my gosh, Jenna is absolutely right. I
Yeah.
didn't."
Yeah.
So the fact is it's kind of natural, but once you get there, it makes
Hmm.
all the difference in the world. And of course, the second time around with Belle, it was much more natural for me.
Yeah.
So when Belle graduated high school, as an example,
Hmm.
um, Belle's birth father, Ricky, said, I want to come to the graduation. And we were like, of course. And not only did he come, he brought his daughter, who was only 3 years old at the time,
Hmm.
and his parents came, which were, of course, Belle's birth grandparents.
Hmm.
And I think about that. It was so poignant because the previous year, both my mom and David's mom passed away.
Hmm.
So the grandmothers that they grew up with were no
Hmm.
longer with us.
Yeah.
But guess who was? There were birth grandparents there
Hmm.
at Belle's graduation. Now,
Hmm.
how great is that?
Yeah.
So by that time, I was fully steeped that this is our family, right?
Right.
And it was just
Yeah.
very easy. Of course, come to the graduation, please.
Right. You
So,
know, something that I hear from families a lot is that they're afraid the child will be confused. And
yes,
I tell them the children are not confused. It's the adults who most
yes.
often are confused because that's not what their story is. So it's confusing. But the children who grow up with this, it's their normal. They don't know anything different. And
It's their normal. That's
yeah.
right. And if you are comfortable with it,
Hmm.
they will be comfortable with it. If
Yeah,
you're uncomfortable with it, that's when the problems happen because they'll be
that's true.
uncomfortable too.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so third question, birth fathers matter. You mentioned learning some hard lessons about the importance of birth fathers to your children. With two very different birth father situations in your family, one very involved and one not. What did you learn, and what would you say to families right now who are navigating birth father relationships or the lack thereof?
Yes. Yeah, this is actually an important one, that birth fathers matter. I was very focused on the birth mother connections.
Yeah.
Naturally and for good reason, right? You should be. There's so many reasons to really be concerned about the birth mother connections if you have those. And because we had a strong relationship with Finley's birth mom, Jenna,
Mm-hmm.
um, the birth father, Michael, though, we knew him, and I think he visited Jen, or I think he visited Finley when Finley was about 3 years old.
Okay.
But after that, he didn't. But
Hmm.
I knew where he was, and he had got married because Jenna and Michael had broken up after Finley was born.
Uh-huh.
But we did exchange Christmas cards and pictures. So, we were not close, but we weren't distant.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't ask to come visit. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't ask to come visit him, or I didn't contact him and ask him to visit because I thought we had a relationship with Jenna and that was going to be enough. Well,
Yep.
what happened was when Finley turned 17 years old, Jenna and Michael they had both previously been married. They both previously got divorced. They met each other again and
Mm-hmm.
they said, "Oh my gosh, we're soulmates." And they decided to get married,
Wow.
which is stunning, right?
Yes, yes.
So Finley's birth parents are marrying each other. And of course, because we were in an open arrangement in contact with both of them, we were invited to the wedding
Mm-hmm.
and we went. It was just fabulous to be there and to witness that. But what happened that day was Finley actually met Michael for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's when they got to know each other. So Finley was 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And after that wedding, Finley said to me, Mom, I always wondered about Michael.
Hmm.
Why doesn't he come see me? Why
Mm.
doesn't he call me? Why doesn't he really write to me? Does he
Right.
even care about me? It really hurt my self-esteem growing up.
Uh-huh.
And I was like shocked, thinking, oh my gosh, your self-esteem was hurt. And
Right.
as a mom now, you think about it, and of course it makes perfect sense. And
Mm-hmm.
particularly because Belle had a pretty strong relationship with her birth father, but
Mm.
her
So Finley
her
saw that.
stronger
Yeah.
relationship was with the
Yeah.
birth father, not the birth mother. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I recognized how much that really hurt. So, and I've read a lot of stories, listened to a lot of adopted folks, and all I want to say is the birth father and that side of the family really matters to the adoptee.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that often birth fathers are sometimes unknown
Yep.
or certainly not in the picture. And it's
Yep.
not as easy usually to connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in that situation, if you can't connect with the birth father, try very hard to connect with somebody from the birth father's family,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a grandmother, a grandfather, a sibling, so that would be an
Yep.
aunt or uncle
Uncle. Mm-hmm.
or anybody, because there's chances are there's somebody in his family
Mm-hmm.
that is stable and would want to connect. And as the adoptive parent, that might take you some work to do that, but I
Uh-huh.
think it will pay dividends for your child to have some connection to the birth father's family as well, if at all possible.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. So birth, my fourth question is birth sibling connections. You said that sibling connections at birth have been a real joy for both of your children. Can you share what those relationships look like in your family and what you've seen in your children that tells you these connections matter to them? And I want to specify, are you referring to the connection with the birth siblings or the connection between the two siblings together in your family, or both?
Okay, well, certainly both,
Okay.
but I wanted to talk about the birth siblings
Okay.
first. So the birth siblings, what I see today, so my children are now 28 and 31 years old,
Okay.
and they both have connections with their biological families, their birth moms and dads, all
Mm-hmm.
four of them
Mm-hmm.
are involved, and then they've got birth siblings.
Okay.
And what I find is when they visit with their biological families,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
is the siblings that they get really excited about. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I just told you that Finley's parents married each other when Finley
Mm-hmm.
was 17.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? They had a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and that little guy is a
Uh-huh.
full birth sibling
Sibling.
to
Oh,
Finley.
yeah.
And I'll never forget when that little boy turned 1, Finley and I visited them together, and we decided we're going to go visit him and meet this little guy.
Yeah.
And Finley, who is not a person that usually is sort of mushy with people,
Mhm.
they're usually a little more stoic. When they met their little brother for the first time,
Mhm.
they cried. I mean, it
Oh.
was visceral. And
Mhm.
here I am watching my child cry these
Uh-huh.
happy tears
Uh-huh.
when they met this little 1-year-old. It was just
Mhm.
stunning.
Yeah.
And now they probably see each other maybe once a year. They have to get on an
Mhm.
airplane to go visit each other, but they do. And when Finley tells me about it, the first thing tells me is about little brother. So, that just tells me a lot. Of course, is happy to see Jenna and Michael, but
Uh-huh.
it's the brother that gets excited about. And Bella's the same. Bella's really close to birth dad Ricky, and he's got
Mhm.
2 children now.
Mhm.
And they do every time Belle sees them, and in fact, they have a tradition now that they've started the last couple of years where Belle spends Thanksgiving with their family.
Oh, okay.
And every time Belle calls me and tells me about it, the first thing out of her mouth is about the little kiddos and how they've grown and how much fun it
Mhm.
is to be with them.
Mhm.
So I see that firsthand. And then I also see, as I read, particularly adoptee stories who have found their families, their
Yeah.
biological families later in
Yeah.
life,
Mhm.
that the connections that they tend to make, the deepest ones, are often with a sibling.
Names. Yeah.
So I think not to underestimate the power and the joy that an adopted person gets
Mhm.
by
Mhm.
meeting and connecting with siblings.
Yeah, that's the thing for our daughter. She has the connection with her siblings because we adopted our daughter from foster care when she was 8. And so it's the sibling connections that she still has and maintains. And so, yeah,
Oh,
that's really
that's awesome. That's
cool.
awesome, Stephanie. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So, okay. So, next question is the book and the evolution. Your book shows that the evolution over years and years, not just the placement story or the early years. Why was it important for you to write about the long view? And what surprised you most as you looked back and reflected on your family's open adoption journey?
Yes, the long view is really important. And when I look back, the first thing I will say is I'm still learning. After 30 years, I'm still learning about
Interesting.
all this open adoption stuff.
Uh-huh.
But the
Why
first
why do
thing,
you think that is?
why that is, because I think that so much is not natural, and there's a lot of knowledge that you need to have. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. I knew nothing about the concept of the primal wound, which
Mm,
I know a lot of people know and understand that today. But the notion that when a baby is separated from the mother at birth, that
mhm.
is a traumatic event.
Right,
And that even though that baby does not have conscious memory of it, they
right.
do have emotional memory. And that can lead to, difficulties in attachment or
Hmm.
concern about abandonment, anger
Hmm.
issues, those kinds of things.
Right.
So I didn't know about any of this, and I raised my kids. I learned about it, by the way, by writing my book as I
Okay.
did more and more research.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I look back and I
Light
can
bulbs.
see these things
Hmm.
with my children.
Right.
So I've got examples of, oh my gosh, was that related
Right.
to, was that trauma related? So the one thing I want to say is, while open adoption has huge benefits, it
Hmm.
does not erase adoption related issues. And
Hmm.
I did have to get therapy for my children when they were teenagers, particularly
Uh-huh.
during that time of identity development. But it didn't occur to me to find an adoption competent
Mm.
therapist, because I
Right.
thought all the problems we had nothing to do with adoption,
Right.
because it was open. I thought it's
Right.
going to erase.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
that's one of the things that I think it's really important, is acknowledging the loss and the grief for that child,
Mm-hmm.
and acknowledging your own loss and grief if you don't have a biological child, if that's a loss for you, and then of course the loss and the grief for the birth parent. So it comes full circle, but acknowledging it,
Right.
that's when you can grow from it and you can come out and heal. But you have to recognize that there are losses. So that's, I think, a really important part of the journey. And
Yeah,
then,
because a lot of people think that if you adopt a child as an infant, they're not going to have issues,
yes,
like adopting an older child does. And that's just simply not true. So,
yeah, that is not true. I mean, we were told, hey, this is the old clean slate
blank slate.
theory.
Yeah.
You bring that baby home and they're a clean slate.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that's just not true. So
Hmm.
there's so much that you do need to know. But
Hmm.
I also need to say, in terms of the transformation, I mentioned at the very beginning that I thought the open adoption, that it made sense for us to do it because of the benefit for the birth mom.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where my thinking stopped.
Right.
What I recognize now is the person that benefits the very most is the adopted child,
Correct.
because my children, as they developed their identity, they had full access to seeing people that looked like them.
Hmm.
And if they ever have a question about medical history, they can just call up their birth parents and ask,
Yeah.
which is so powerful. But the most powerful thing that happened to them through the visits was their birth parents told them, and just the way they acted and came and visit, how much they loved them and cared about them. So
Hmm.
they knew that from the very beginning, and it
Hmm.
got reinforced every time we had a visit.
Right.
And they were told their birth story from their birth parents. Why did
Hmm.
they make the adoption
Yep.
plan? So, how powerful is that to
Right.
know your story first time? So, there was no void there.
Right.
So, it's one of these things that they benefit and they felt the love, and that is worth everything.
Hmm. That's great. Okay. Some final words of wisdom and resources. So, as we wrap up, what do you wish you could tell every adoptive parent who's feeling scared about open adoption right now? And where can people connect with you and find your book?
Okay. So, being scared and being overwhelmed with this idea of open adoption is perfectly natural. I think every adoptive parent that goes into this arrangement feels it and they know it. And so it's so valid.
Hmm.
Um, Even though like I said, we embraced it, but it
Right.
it is a leap of faith.
Yep.
And what the adoptive parents need to recognize that once that adoption is finalized,
Hmm.
you are in control.
Yeah.
And it really is up to you with how you develop the relationships. And
Hmm.
obviously, the safety and all those things are very, very important. And you're going to do what's best for your child.
Right.
But recognize that you're in control and do everything to keep those connections through the good and the bad and
Hmm.
the hard times. And it will benefit your child greatly when you
Yeah.
do that.
I think it's important for people to know that that is really the adoptive parent's responsibility. It's not the birth
Yes.
parents, it's not the child's, it's the adoptive
It's the
parents.
adoptive parents. And then
So,
at some time you release them and then they're on their own to
hmm,
connect when
very
they
true.
see fit. And that's kind of
Yeah,
where we are right now. And I
yeah,
love it. I love it.
yeah.
And they connect with each other very freely.
Hmm.
But you can find me, my website, lindarsexton.com. You can learn about the book there, but I also do blogs when I have a story. I've done several podcasts that you can listen to. And one of the podcasts I did was with my daughter, Belle.
Okay.
And sometimes listening to the adoptee, how they felt about open adoption can be very, very powerful. So
Mhm.
if you go to my website, you can see that as well as getting information. And I'm happy to speak to any group about open adoption. That's my mission. to do
Mm-hmm.
that right now. And if you do choose to listen to or read the book, just know that all author profits go to provide support and therapy to adopted persons and birth parents. And now that I've come through this, I just want to give back to that community.
I think that is fantastic that you do that. So I knew that's what drew you to reaching out to me because you knew that we were partnered with what's currently called On Your Feet Foundation
Yes,
and the connection there. So yeah, very cool.
absolutely. Yeah.
Linda, thank you so much for sharing your story with your wisdom with us today. I know our families will find this incredibly helpful. For everyone watching, you can find Linda's book. I'll just reiterate this again. You can find Linda's book, The Branches We Cherish, an open adoption memoir, on Amazon, Bookshop, Audible, and wherever books are sold. It's available in hardback, paperback, Kindle, and audiobook format. I highly recommend the audiobook. It's like having Linda tell her story over coffee. Or for me, it was while driving across the state of Kansas over Christmas break. And it's absolutely worth your time. You can also connect with Linda through her website, which was lindarsexton.com. And we'll have that linked into the show notes here as well, where you can read her blog, sign up for her newsletter, and connect with her directly. She's made it very clear that she's happy to engage with families and also other organizations as well on their journey so that you don't have to, so don't hesitate reaching out to her. And remember, all of Linda's author profits go to providing support, therapy for adopted persons and birth parents. So when you buy the book, you know what you are supporting as well. So yeah, thank you again, Linda.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephanie. And I wish all of your listeners the very best on their journey. It's
Great.
not easy, but it is so worthwhile.
I agree.